A pioneer of personal computing, Michael Dell launched Dell Technologies when he was just 19 years old with $1,000 in his pocket. Since then, he's revolutionized the tech industry, creating one of the most successful companies in the world while helping to put computers into millions of homes over the last 36 years. Today, Dell remains an important leader in both business and philanthropy, speaking out on issues around diversity in the workplace and raising money for pandemic relief. In this episode of Influencers, I speak with Michael Dell about the role of business in today's society and how Dell Technologies can better serve its customers after COVID-19. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Serwer, and welcome to Influencers. Welcome to our guest, Michael Dell, the Chairman and CEO of Dell Technologies. Michael, so great to see you.
It's great to be with you, Andy.
So much to talk about, a lot going on. Let me start and ask you about George Floyd. And Dell released a statement condemning the killing of George Floyd and acknowledging that more work needed to be done in this country to address racial inequality. What steps is the company taking, Michael, and what about you personally?
Well, first of all, let me just say, it was a very sad thing to watch, as a man was murdered, his life was taken away, and that's not something you'll ever forget. Look, I think companies play a really big role here. When people don't feel that they have opportunities and they're left out, I think that's obviously problematic. It's also an opportunity for companies. So. We have for a long time embraced diversity, inside our company. Not saying we're perfect at it, but I think we've created the conditions for success. And in a bit of a silver lining, I think this has opened up the conversation in a new way. And allowed us to have even a more in-depth, dialogue and understanding, and hopefully more progress. And we, I think, can lead by example in creating an inclusive culture and creating the support that our team members need, and ultimately, I'll just say I'm not real optimistic that that government forces are going to drive the change here. I think it's going to be up to companies to create the conditions and the opportunities for success for the communities that have not had them, and that's what we're trying to do.
And you have some work to do at your own company. You might acknowledge, Michael, because you don't have a tremendous number of African American executives in the C-suite or on the board. Is this something you think you guys need to address?
Yes, and we've set pretty ambitious goals for ourselves. We every 10 years we lay out a set of ambitious goals, and we just did that. With our 2030 goals. We had our almost a decade ago our 2020 legacy of good, and now we've laid out a set of moonshot goals. So, our goals for 2030, 25% of our workforce will be Black and African American and Hispanic and Latino minorities. 50% of our global workforce and 40% of our people leaders will be women. We've also set big goals for our green initiative, and you and I have talked about that in the past. For every product a customer buys, we'll reuse or recycle an equivalent product. 100% of our packaging will be made from recycled and renewable materials. And we don't actually know how to do all these things, but that's sort of the point. And if I go back a decade ago when we set the 2020 goals, we didn't know how to do all of those either, but we actually achieved a significant majority of them. So, those are the aspirations that we've set for ourselves.
Right. And then just about the tech industry writ large, with, say yourself and Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. It's a lot of white guys at the top, and people have criticized the business for being a white male bastion. More work to be done generally, and I think the line has been, well, there's just not enough candidates, but it's more than that, right? It's maybe not trying hard enough by the industry overall.
Yeah, I think it's multifactorial. And we've got a role to play for sure. And while there's been some progress, as you said, collectively, it's not enough. And look, I think also we can look across lots of organizations, and it's not clear that anybody has really broken through. And it remains work to be done for everyone. And I would just say, the recent incidents have kind of redoubled our resolve around the goals that we've had, and again, in a positive way, I think opened up the conversation, and hopefully that will lead to positive change for communities of color.
Switching over to coronavirus, so what impact has the coronavirus outbreak had on the tech sector? I mean, this is a big question, and how have companies responded generally? It's just sort of been a big reset, right?
Yeah, look, I think it has highlighted, first of all, how much business activity has been able to be continued during this period. I mean, if you think about the technological improvements, in networks and computing power that have occurred in the last decade or so, think how much devastation there would have been to both the economy, to education, to the social support systems that we have if we didn't have these technologies. I also think there's been an acceleration of digital transformation. What would have taken months, is now happening much faster. And I think that there's also some human impact here. I think there's some new empathy, and organizations are interacting with new ways, in new ways with all their teams. I think we got a kind of glimpse of the future, right? And we're not going to go back to the way, to the ways that we used to work. And fortunately, our company had enabled flexible work environments starting about a decade ago, and I think a lot of this is going to stay with us. And it just emphasizes the importance of some of the big investments that need to be made in 5G. And there's kind of companies that are digitally enabled and kind of digitally forward thinking and capable, and those are the ones that are more prepared.
How do you see the economy opening up and our society opening up? How do you think that's going to play out into the summer and into the fall and into 2021, Michael?
I think if you'd asked me a month or so ago, I would have said it's going to be slow and gradual. I guess I'm feeling a little more optimistic now, having seen some of the reopenings, and they seem to be going reasonably well. I think for many workers, if you're in a work environment where you don't have to go to the office, people aren't rushing back to the office. The interesting thing about this virus is one can assume that at the end, whatever that is, the case count is 7.4 billion. In other words, everyone will either get the virus or they will get a vaccine, and we just don't know when that is. But it's also becoming clear that it has disparate impact on certain populations, and so that has to be accounted for as we think about restarting the economy. But I'm pretty encouraged with what I'm seeing about the restart. I mean, I think there are issues of and again, how do we protect the vulnerable populations? But here in Texas, for example, there has not been it has not been a horrible public health care outcome, and I think there's still kind of cautious steps being taken in the reopening.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's all become politicized to a degree, right? And
yeah, unfortunately, I think everything gets politicized. So that is sad to see.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I guess you could argue that President Trump was right in some instances, maybe wasn't right in other instances. In other words, I think that geographies are critically important. Denser places, probably required a different response from less dense places, for instance, right?
Well, we've certainly learned a lot, now here in June versus what we knew in March, right? In terms of how the virus spreads, who is most vulnerable to it, and how best to treat it, et cetera. So, and of course, the other exciting thing is we have an enormous effort going on in the healthcare system with therapeutics and monoclonal antibodies and vaccines. And so, I would never underestimate human ingenuity and progress to go out there and address this. And so, I'll remain my optimistic self.
So let's switch over to Dell a little bit, Michael. The company seems to be doing pretty well. You surprised the street in the latest quarter. Stock's up, 44% since the low point in March. What's going on?
So look, we created an incredible business with the combination of Dell and EMC and VMware and Pivotal, and Dell Technologies is doing well. We have continued to gain share in all of our major businesses, and as you said, during our first quarter. It was a very solid quarter. We beat the analyst estimates for revenue, for profit, for earnings per share. Our non-GAAP op inc was $2.2 billion, and we materially outperformed our competitors in terms of growth in every major product category. So, and that's actually not a new thing. It's been going on for a couple of years now. So customers have appreciated, the capabilities that we have, and our team executed very strongly. And look, I think our supply chain performed incredibly well. We have a distributed manufacturing and logistics network, and we were able to operate well, in spite of the challenges that were out there. Certainly, there, was strong demand for things like work from home solutions, but also, we grew faster than the industry in the data center, and VMware continues to do very well in helping customers prepare their organizations for their digital futures.
And what's the split right now? Talk to us about the company in terms of public and private, or B2C and B2B is what I'm saying, I guess. What percentage of the company is B2C versus B2B, and what is the future strategy for the B2C part of the business, the consumer part of the business?
So, the B2C part is probably the part that people see the most, but it's actually the smallest part of the business. So, it's in the kind of 12, 13, 14% range of revenues, depending on the quarter. But we're mostly a B2B company. But look, we've got, a strong consumer business. We've got Alienware, XPS notebooks are doing very well. And, the online business, is growing. Our online visits in April to DellTechnologies.com and Dell.com, we're up 77% and 28%. But the real epicenter of the company is in the data center, and with large companies building out their multi-cloud platforms and dealing with the enormous increase in the amount of data. I mean, somebody once said that, data is the new oil. Well, kind of, but not exactly, in the sense that, as far as I know, there's a finite amount of oil on planet Earth, but with data, it's not finite at all. In fact, it continues to increase. And the real challenge of our time for companies is to figure out, and all organizations, governments, et cetera, is how do we use all this data to improve whatever it is we're trying to do, right? And with more everything in the world becoming intelligent and connected, with the 5G coming around the corner, and then you have AI and machine learning, all these technologies come together to create an incredible opportunity for organizations. And that requires lots of new capabilities, infrastructure, and that's really what Dell Technologies provides.
Yeah, so you're telling me, Michael, that, hey, Dell's a cloud company, which is a pretty hot space to be in, and it's a good place to be in. So can you explain a little bit more, though, exactly what you're selling and providing for companies then? I mean, what is the actual business for in layman's terms?
Yeah, so if you think about, some of our customers, if you went down the list of the 25 biggest banks in the world, they're pretty much all our customers. And so how is it, what is it that a bank does? Well, one of the things it does is it It has incredible amounts of data. It has to secure it. It has to process that. And how does it do that? Well, it requires applications. It requires infrastructure. One of the big themes is how do you automate all of that so you don't have lots of people running around, and technologies like virtualization and are incredibly important there. So we are really the essential infrastructure company with hardware and software that enables companies to build that infrastructure that is the platform for how they deliver their businesses. And look, I think the other interesting thing that's occurred in the last, I would say, 5 years or so is that the domain of technology has really changed. It used to be that technology was in the IT department, right? But now, if you go to almost any company, you say, what is the role of technology? Well, it's really involved in the entire business. And the business line executives, the chief executive, are all thinking about technology and data and how they can use data to make their product and service better. And of course, they need infrastructure to be able to do that. So we're number one in all the major categories of hardware, software, infrastructure, cloud infrastructure to help organizations as they build out their digital future.
So who are your biggest competitors then? Is it AWS, Google? How does that work?
Yeah, our industry is sort of characterized, as you know, by a kind of co-opetition. So one of the things that organizations have realized is that it's not really the public cloud or the private cloud. It's both, right? And so you hear terms like private, like hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. And what organizations have figured out is it's really dependent on the workload. And certain workloads, you might use a software as a service provider. Some you might have on premise, some you might have in a public cloud, some you might have with a colo, some you might have on the edge, which is starting to grow quite fast. And you want to move them all around and back and forth. And depending on the type of workload, there's going to be a right place for it. And so we collaborate and compete with lots of companies in the industry, but we're also fortunate to be serving essentially all the Fortune 500.
And what is the vision for the initiative about?
So that is really about how we can use our business to drive social impact. And we've set some moonshot goals for the next decade. You can find them on our website, but they're around diversity and inclusion. They're around environmental sustainability. These are not really new things for us. As you know from our prior conversations, we have always kind of set a pretty high standard for ourselves, and so we're doing it again with these goals. And it challenges our people to think differently. And as it relates to the environment, look, it's easy to say, well, what are the rules? We'll comply with those, right? But the rule makers are sort of dealing with the rearview mirror, and instead we like to take a proactive approach and say, well, what's really possible here, and how can we reimagine what we're doing, and at the same time have a very positive impact on the environment and bring our customers increased savings. And what we found time and time again is our engineers, we've got 20,000 engineers and scientists, actually become quite motivated and inspired by the challenge to be able to work on these things. And so, I think maybe at one point it was a nice thing to do. I think it's no longer the case that it's really required for a responsible business to do these things.
Let's switch and talk a little bit about philanthropy. You've set up the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, given $1.7 billion over the years. What have you focused on?
Really focused on children in urban poverty. And, that really gets into education, healthcare, economic stability and opportunities. And that's been the primary data-driven approach, a results-driven approach. And there you go. That's been our area of focus.
$100 million for coronavirus relief. What have you done there specifically, Michael?
Yeah. So, as we saw the effects of COVID-19, it was becoming clear to us that the economic fallout from the virus was pretty significant to the communities that our foundation has served for decades now. And so we did dedicate $100 million specifically to this, $20 million to the therapeutics accelerator that was launched by the Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, and MasterCard to help identify and accelerate the development of therapeutics and vaccines. The other $80 million, is around supporting the healthcare systems and increased medical capacity, helping to sustain the vital work that our nonprofit partners and social enterprises, provide at a time when their efforts will be needed even more. We're focused on the education system and helping schools adapt as they, deal with this and look forward to the new school year ahead. And finally, initiatives around stabilizing small businesses, micro entrepreneurs, and gig workers whose livelihoods are important to our communities and the overall economy. And one of the things we did here in Texas, there's no longer a PPE shortage, and one of our Dell supply chain executives took a leave of absence, went to go work for the state of Texas. The state, and he immediately helped the state, procure a bunch of PPE. But he ran into a problem, and that was that a lot of the suppliers wouldn't accept the state's terms of business. And so anyway, our foundation set up a mechanism that put the risk on the foundation and help the state make sure it had access to the right quantity of PPE and avoided problems there.
Coronavirus could exacerbate the economic divide between the haves and have-nots in our society in terms of education, just in terms of Wi-Fi and virtual education, right? Is that something that concerns you?
It is. I mean, I think there is a kind of digital inequality that we have to all think about, in the sense that, if there are populations that don't have access to the digital opportunities and the tools and the capabilities, it's going to be a lot harder, and as not just here in the United States, but obviously around the world. It's a big challenge.
And last question, Michael, you and I have known each other for a number of decades now. And so I'm wondering if you've considered much the narrative arc of your career. You were this wunderkind with this PC startup, grew like crazy, growth slowed, the private period, and coming back, and had a renaissance, not unlike Apple maybe even, but because maybe it's more B2B, it's a little bit less visible to the public. And I would imagine you don't consider yourself done by any means. So what does this all mean to Michael Dell?
Well, first of all, I feel very fortunate and grateful to have had the opportunities I've had. As you said, I've kind of had many lives. Starting out in my dorm room at the University of Texas, which I can actually see out the window here, and starting a business. Growing it to be $92 billion business, being involved in philanthropy, being an investor, buying back my company, taking it public again, setting up an investment firm and a foundation. So look, it's been a lot of fun, and it continues to be fun. And as you said, I'm 55, so still got lots of fun ahead. And look, I continue to be an optimist about the positive role that technology plays in our future, even as there are forces out there that would seek to create division and controversy and strife. I continue to be optimistic that technology will play a great and positive role in our future, and our company has been fortunate to be able to help many with that over the last 36 years, and look forward to doing that for a long time to come.
Yes, indeed. Much more to come from Michael Dell. Michael Dell, CEO of Dell Technologies. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.
You've been watching Influencers. This is Andy Serwer. We'll see you next time.